Today we're going to be talking about revising your essay. And so we're going to talk about revisions, the first sentence revision technique, the great college essay test, and how we can use that test to kind of revise our essay. We're going to kind of look at how you can show you're smart in your essay in a very humble way, or a way that actually makes sense and brings that across in an effective way. But also we're going to talk about how you can showcase your achievements in an effective way as well. So with that in mind, we can get right into it. So where should you be at this point? At this point, whether or not you're actually at this point, this is where you should be after all of the sessions. So you've done your brainstorming exercises, you've spent some time brainstorming, you've done some time outlining, and then you've written your first draft. Now remember, your first draft is your prototype. This is a proof of concept where you're looking at all the ideas you have and you're seeing, does this work on paper? Now the revisions process, or the revising process, is all about crafting that final product. You have the prototype. At this point, you're making the requisite changes in order to make it a final product, something that you can put on the shelf and give out to colleges as a college essay. And I've said this in every step along the process, and this is so true for revising, more so sometimes than even writing the paper. Revising is going to be hard, it's going to be frustrating, and it's going to be time consuming, but it is going to be worth it, because you do need to spend time doing revisions on your essay in order to make it stand out from the rest. I know there were multiple times where I think, looking back when I was applying to colleges, where I didn't revise enough, because it's so easy to just say, oh, this is a draft that I love, I am passionate about, but it might not be in the best state. Make sure that you're revising, getting feedback, so that you can make that essay into the best that it possibly can be. Now, your mission with the revising process is to make it flow, is to make it make sense. Now, what this means is that there are going to be things that you're going to have to let go. Stephen King, famous author who wrote It and inspired the movies, wrote in his book in 2000 on writing, he said, "Mostly when I think of pacing, I go back to Elmore Leonard, who explained it so perfectly by saying he just left out the boring parts. This suggests cutting to speed, the pace. That's what most of us end up having to do. Kill our darlings, even when it breaks your egocentric little scribbler's heart. Kill your darlings," which is basically he's saying that there are going to be parts of a story, of our essays, and of course for him it was fiction writing, that are going to be things that we love, but things that we have to cut. And then he continues by saying, "I got scribbled a comment that changed the way I wrote my fiction once and forever. I got down below that the machine-generated signature of the editor was this smart. Not bad, but puffy. You need to revise for length. Formula, second draft equals first draft minus 10%. Good luck." Now, obviously, we are not writing a book, and we have a set word limit that we need to stay under. And so this is the advice of the first draft needs to be 10% less than the second draft does not apply to us. But what does apply to us is this idea that we have to be willing to let some of our ideas go. Sometimes we have an idea that we love, but it just does not work in our essay. And if we want to make sure that our essay is effective, sometimes we have to, in the words of Stephen King, kill our darlings, right? So that's a part of that process. So with that in mind, the idea that we are going to have to let things go, we're going to have to make it flow, we're going to have to spend time revising and sending this out to other individuals, let's look at what this looks like. Now, before we do that, I think we need to look at both endodontics and with debate, and we need to observe two things about these essays. Now, I'm going to go ahead and read endodontics again, just because I think for those who might be watching, or for those who haven't gone through some of the prior sessions, or those who need a reminder, I think it's important to kind of get an idea of what these essays are about. And I think by reading just endodontics, we can kind of get the idea behind the essay. And again, feel free to mute me and feel free to read it for yourself if you feel as though your pacing, you would prefer to read it over listening to me. But yes, I'll go ahead and get started. As a kid, I was always curious. I was unafraid to ask questions and didn't worry how dumb they would make me sound. In second grade, I enrolled in a summer science program and built a solar-powered oven that baked real cookies. I remember obsessing over the smallest details. Should I paint the oven black to absorb more heat? What about its shape? A spherical shape would allow for more volume, but would it trap heat as well as conventional rectangular ovens? Even then, I was obsessed with the details of design. And it didn't stop in second grade. A few years later, I designed my first pair of shoes, working for hours to perfect each detail, including whether the laces would be mineral white or diamond white. Even then, I sensed that minor differences in tonality could make a huge impact, and that different colors could evoke different responses. In high school, I moved on to more advanced projects, teaching myself how to take apart, repair, and customize cell phones, whether I was adjusting the flex cords that connect the IPS LCD to the iPhone motherboard or replacing the vibrator motor. I love discovering the many engineering feats Apple overcame in its efforts to combine form with function. And once I obtained my driver's license, I began working on cars. Many nights you'll find me in the garage replacing standard chrome trim with an elegant piano black finish, or changing the threads on the stitching of the seats to add a personal touch, as I believe a few small changes can transform a generic product into a personalized work of art. My love of details applies to my schoolwork too. I'm the math geek who marvels at the fundamental theorems of calculus, or who sees beauty in this equation. Again, it's in the details. One bracket off or one digit missing and the whole equation collapses. The details are more than details. They can make the difference between negative and positive infinity, and in possible range of solutions. I also love sharing this appreciation with others, and have taken it upon myself to personally eradicate mathonomophobia confundosis, my calculus teacher's term for extreme fear of math. A small group of other students and I have devoted our after-school time to tutoring our peers in everything from pre-algebra to AP Calculus BC. And I believe my fluency in Hebrew and Farsi has helped me connect with some of my school's Israeli and Iranian students. There's nothing better than teaching or than seeing a student solve a difficult problem without me saying anything. You probably think I want to be a designer or perhaps an engineer. Wrong? Well, kind of. Actually, I want to study endodontics, which is, I'll save you the Wikipedia lookup, a branch of dentistry that deals with the tooth pulp and the tissues surrounding the root of a tooth. As an endodontist, I'll be working to repair damaged teeth by performing precision root canals and implementing dental crowns. Sound exciting? It is to me. The fact is, it's not unlike the work I've been doing repairing cell phone circuits and modifying cars, but there is one small difference. In the future, I'll still be working to repair machines. This machine is one of the most sophisticated machines ever created, the human body. Here, my obsession with details will be as crucial as ever. A 1 millimeter difference can mean the difference between a successful root canal and a lawsuit. The question is, will the toothbrushes I hand out be mineral white or diamond white? So let's keep that essay in mind as we look at the next part of this. Now, the observation that I want to point you to is that if you take out the first sentence of every paragraph in this essay and you simply read each sentence in the order in which it is written, the essay makes sense. As a kid, I was always curious, and it didn't stop in second grade. A few years later, I designed my first pair of shoes, working for hours to perfect each detail, including whether the laces should be mineral white or diamond white. In high school, I moved on to more advanced projects, teaching myself how to take apart, repair, and customize cell phones. And once I obtained my driver's license, I began working on cars. My love of detail applies to my schoolwork too. I'm the math geek who marvels at the fundamental theorems of calculus or who sees beauty in this equation. I also love sharing this appreciation with others and have taken it upon myself to personally eradicate mathonomophobia confundosis, my calculus teacher's term for extreme fear of math. You probably think I want to be a designer or perhaps an engineer. Wrong. Well, kind of. Actually, I want to study endodontics, which is, I'll save you the Wikipedia lookup, a branch of dentistry that deals with the tooth pulp and the tissue surrounding the root canal. The fact is, it's not unlike the work I've been doing repairing cell phone circuits and modifying cars, though there is one small difference. The question is, will the toothbrushes I hand out be mineral white or diamond white? All right, so we can see that the above essay, it makes sense if we simply boil it down to its topic sentences and read those in chronological order, in the order that they are written in the essay. And this same observation applies to with debate. Now, I won't read with debate simply because, there's just not enough time to do that. But what I'll do is I'll pause here and then I'll pause here, so those who are watching later can pause it and then read it for your own benefit. Again, both of these essays are essays that I go over prior sessions, so feel free to look at those sessions if you want a more in-depth analysis, and we'll be looking back at these essays later on during this session. But the same observation applies to this essay as well. The clock was remarkably slow as I sat, legs tightly crossed, squirming at my desk. My diffidence was frustrating. Near meltdown, I knew something needed to be done. Disillusioned and wrung of ideas, I followed my mom's advice and joined a debate club. But soon, the club moved on from how to make a speech lessons to the exploration of argumentation. By high school, I joined the school debate team, began socializing, and was even elected to head several clubs. I began proud and confident. 4 years with debate, and now I'm the kid up at the whiteboard, the kid leading discussions, and the kid standing up for her beliefs. More importantly, I now confront issues instead of avoiding them. In particular, I'm interested in the North-South Korea tension. I see a reflection of myself in the divide at the 38th parallel, because I see one part isolating itself in defense to outside threats, another part coming out to face the world as one of the fastest developing nations. And so, it's clear that there are things missing from this reading of the essay, like there are development that needs to be had in the essay, but the overall flow of the essay, the overall ideas in the essay, you can kind of see them, and they come out with this simply topic sentence analysis of the essay. And so we can see this in these essays, and this same observation should to a significant extent be present in your essay as well. And we can use that to revise our essays. We can use this for the first sentence revision technique. All right, so in order to use this technique, what you need to do is you need to highlight the first sentence of each paragraph and then read your entire essay simply by reading those first sentences from each part of your essay. And there will be some parts that will make sense, and obviously there'll be some parts that won't make sense based upon this reading. Now, obviously, what you want to make sure is that you aren't saying, oh, well, there's so much idea here that I need to develop. It's not that you can see every idea developed in your topic sentence. What you want to see is an overall flow to your essay, a flow that makes sense logically. And that's going to really help your essay flow as we revise this part of your essay. All right, once you've read your essay sentence by topic sentence, rewrite the new sentences that flow together. So you can either rewrite the sentences that you have. You might need to add new sentences to your existing essay in order to make it flow. Whatever you need to do to make your topic sentences flow. What you then need to do is you take these topic sentences, paste them into an entirely new document, and rewrite the paragraphs associated with those topic sentences. Now, I think for some people that's like, whoa, well, you want me to rewrite my entire essay? Here's the thing. Oftentimes, when we write something initially, we fall in love with the phrasing of the essay. We fall in love with the examples that we give, the words that we use. And so it can be very, very hard to revise an essay if we don't do just this. If we don't take these topic sentences, paste them into a new document, and then write those paragraphs again. Now, what's going to be interesting, I think, as you go through this process is you'll probably put a lot of the same stuff into this essay. You'll probably put a lot of the same phrasing into this essay. And so what you'll find is that it won't actually be that hard to rewrite your essay in this way, because you're going to have already written the essay. So you're already going to have ideas about how to write, what to write about, but it'll be a way that focuses on that topic sentence. So the goal of this exercise is to make your essay flow by rewriting those topic sentences, connecting every paragraph together in a very coherent way, but also making sure that the stuff in your paragraph makes sense as compared to your topic sentence. That is going to be done most easily, I think, by pasting them into a new document. Again, because it's hard to revise something that you've fallen in love with and cut things out. It's going to be a lot easier to do that if you're simply rewriting those paragraphs with a topic sentence. All right, once you've done this entire process, rewritten those topic sentences, rewritten the paragraphs, take a break, clear your head. This could obviously be, a 15, 30-minute break, take a day off, something like that, because this is going to be, mentally draining. Then what you need to do is you need to essentially repeat the process, which is you need to read your first sentences again. If they don't make sense, you need to repeat the above process again. If they do make sense, read your essay aloud and make sure that the paragraphs make sense together and support the topic sentence. Now, I can not stress this enough, how important it is to read your essay aloud. I wrote an honors thesis for, of course, I'm a senior, and part of that is, of course, writing an extended amount of reading. And so the other day I was doing some final revisions on it, and I was reading it, aloud, because I know if I'm reading something over and over again, or if I'm reading something that's very, very long, I can pay attention to that if I'm, reading a book. But if I'm reading my own writing, oftentimes I've said, oh, I've read this, 7 times, 8 times, 10 times, and it's hard to catch mistakes. And so when you read it aloud, what that allows you to do is to get into the mindset of somebody who hasn't read it before, and you're kind of reading it, you're saying, can I read this in a way that makes sense? And so as you're reading it aloud, you'll find places where, like, that's awkwardly worded there, or that really doesn't make sense. Let me rewrite that. And so that's the purpose of reading your essay aloud. It's a critical tool. Use it as you go to college, but definitely use it as you're writing and revising your essay, because that is a critical tool that you can use to read your essay in a critical way. All right, so now once you've done this process where you've rewritten and you've read aloud and then you've made some of those small changes that you need to make, this is where you can get some really solid feedback. Maybe you're struggling with making your essay flow. There are going to be people who are able to make your essay flow, help you out with that entire process. And so, but the idea there, again, is that you need to have a solid foundation. And so at this point, you've had your prototype and you've done some significant work on your prototype. Once you get this first sentence revision technique done, you're basically just going to be polishing your essay. I mean, maybe there comes a point where you have to make some more significant changes, but at this point, it's all about polishing your essay. And yes, this is going to be a long process, this first sentence revision technique. It's going to pay off, because once you're done with it, you're making those smaller changes along the way that are going to bring out your main ideas, bring out your values, that's really going to set your essay apart from other essays. All right, so how can we do those smaller changes in your essay? Ethan Sawyer has a great thing in his book, which is the Great College Essay Test. And this is taken directly from that book. He says that a great college essay has 4 kind of categories of things that need to be met. And as you're reading your essay, or really after you read your essay, ask yourself these questions, or ask someone who's read your essay these questions, so that you can get some honest feedback about these critical areas in your essay. So the first thing, you need to have core values that you illustrate about yourself. So after reading the essay, can you, or the person reading your essay and giving you feedback, can they name at least 4 or 5 of the author's core values? Now, is there a variety of values, or are the values repetitive? Here's a not varied set of values: hard work, determination, perseverance. Although there are small differences between the meanings of all of those words, they have a very similar kind of theme to all of them. And so if you simply have this in your essay, it's going to be kind of boring and uninspired if you simply have these core values that are all very, very similar. So make sure that you have a variety of values: autonomy, resourcefulness, healthy boundaries, diversity. I mean, you can see how autonomy and resourcefulness, those are similar, but they're far less similar than hard work, determination, and perseverance. But they're also accompanied by other kinds of values: healthy boundaries, diversity. Those are all different values, thus giving it more diversity in its set of values that the author is conveying about himself or herself. In your essay, are you vulnerable? And a critical question is, does the essay have heart, or is it mostly intellectual? I know for me, it can be very hard to be vulnerable in any kind of writing. And so for me, I tend to fall into the trap where I go through like an intellectual process in a lot of my writing, and that's just like who I am as a person. And so if I were to look back at my college essays, I think I did a fine job in this, but I think there could have been more vulnerability that was conveyed in my essays. And because oftentimes we do get into the trap of simply having it an intellectual side, which is simply making it a description of events, but not giving your internal process of digesting the events that are occurring, which is going to be crucial in the so what section. But we'll get to that here in a second. After reading, do you know more about the author and feel closer to the author? Again, ask yourself these questions after you've read your essay to see what areas you need to improve on. So what about these so what moments, which are simply the important and interesting connections that you make about your examples with these connections, or these so what? Why is this important moments? All right. Can you identify at least 3 to 5 so what moments of insight in the essay? Are these moments too predictable, or are they actually or important insights that you have as an author and as a person? And we'll go into more depth with a lot of these as well. So if you're kind of confused as to what I'm talking about, again, feel free to ask a question, but we'll go into how to address the problems with each of these sections. All right, and then craft, or the style of your essay. Do the ideas in the essay connect in a way that is logical but not too obvious or boring? Again, much of that will come from that first sentence technique revision, which is crucial, critical. Can you tell that the essay represents a series of carefully considered choices, in that the author spent a lot of time revising the essay over the course of several drafts? I think this is an important part too, because I think there are, when you read an essay, you can tell to a significant degree how much effort has been put into that essay. If you look at, even endodontics and with debate, you can see that the authors there had to go through a series of careful choices in order to talk about what they're going to put into the essay, what they're going to leave out of the essay, how they're going to talk about what they're going to include in the essay. Those are choices that are hard to make well in just one sitting. That's why revisions are so important, and that comes out in the final product of your essay. For an essay reader who's read probably thousands of essays, at some of these schools, this is going to be something that they can easily pick up on. So make sure that you are rewriting and revising your essay, because it's going to come out in the final product. People are going to notice it, and it's going to impact your chances of getting into the school that you want to get into. All right. Is it interesting and succinct throughout? Again, we'll discuss what that means. If not, where do you lose interest? Where could words be cut, or which part isn't revealing as much as it could be? All right, so we've got these 4 broad sections, and some critical questions that we need to ask ourselves, and some critical ideas that we need to be thinking about as we're writing our essay. All right, so how can we bring in more values, or really make the sections with our values clearer and better? All right, so again, Ethan Sawyer recommends 4 to 5 core values that you convey in your essay. And I'll point out that these values that are conveyed don't have to be explicit. So for example, I don't have to say in my essay, I am a curious person. Now, it might be good to say that to make it explicit, but you don't have to convey a lot of ideas explicitly in order for those ideas to get across. But what I will say is that if you aren't conveying your ideas explicitly, they still need to be clear. They still need to be clear. All right, so when you're looking and evaluating the values and how you incorporate those values into your essay, ask these questions. Which values are clearly coming through in the essay? Write those down and highlight those specific sentences in your essay, right? So where are these values found in a specific sentence or sentences? Which values are coming through the essay but need to be expressed more clearly? Now, which values aren't there yet but could be or should be there? Once you've asked yourself these questions, and I would write your answers down to these questions. As I've been over many times throughout these sessions, it's important to have a visual representation of your thought process, because it is going to help you through that thought process. All right, once you've done this, ask yourself these questions, written it down, then do these things. First, cut sections where no values are clearly being communicated. Now, importantly, there are ways to incorporate values into many sections that you might think don't have values, but also if a section of your essay is critical to the overall idea or to the flow of your essay, obviously don't cut that. But if there are big sections of your essay that do not convey a value, then you might need to cut it or revise it so that it includes values, which is the second part. Rewrite sections where the values aren't super clear. And finally, if you feel that it is that you don't have enough values, or there are values that you still need to add to your essay, add sections that will clearly communicate values that aren't there. Now, it is important to also point out here that Ethan Sawyer says 4 to 5, not 10, not 15. What can happen when you include too many of these values? It can feel as if you're throwing things at your reader, things that aren't well developed, things that really don't convey who you are as a person. And so you do need to go through the thought process of what are these most important values to me, or the most important values that I want to convey to my reader, and include those into your essays. And there might be other values that come across maybe less clearly, but make sure that you focus on these 4 to 5 core values. And also make sure to cut those repetitive values. If you have, hard work, dedicated, those are very, very similar. And so focus on one, unless there's a clear reason why you should include both of those in your essay. All right, so with those values, doing this exercise is going to make your values a lot clearer and a lot more obvious to your reader. All right, so how do you bring in vulnerability? So for me, I think bringing in vulnerability really comes to a large extent at the front end of your writing process, really about the brainstorming process. What are you going to include in your essay? If you're type A or C person, where you already have a challenge that you're going to be writing about, what challenge are you going to be writing about? If you're a B or D person, what challenges are you going to be writing about? What you include in your essay is going to make a difference in how vulnerable you seem in that essay. And so what I'd recommend you do is go back to the brainstorming session that I did, so that you can look at what some of these brainstorming exercises are, so you can include them into your essay. Probably the most applicable to this specific aspect of your essay, vulnerability, is the feelings and needs exercise, where you take a sheet of paper horizontally, you have those 6 sections about challenges, effects, feelings, needs, what I did and what I learned. And then you fill those out. Challenges, name some challenges that you face in your life. Effects, what are the concrete effects of those challenges on your life? Feelings, how did you feel about those challenges and those effects? What were your needs during this time? What did you do to address those needs? And what did you learn at the end of the entire process? And again, I'll go through what mine would look like. For me, a challenge that I faced was stuttering. The concrete effects of this challenge was a lack of confidence and that I didn't speak much. What were my feelings about these concrete effects? I felt unheard, but at the same time, I felt at peace because I wasn't being challenged by others. What were my needs during this challenge? First, I needed to be given a chance to express myself, but I also needed to be challenged, to be pushed out of my comfort zone. What did I do? I sought out people that I felt comfortable with, and I talked to them, but I also joined my school speech and debate team. What did I learn through this process? Confidence and helping others. So you have this entire process. Now, again, during this brainstorming exercise, do this multiple times. And so if you're a type A or C type person, pick the vulnerable story. Pick the story that means a lot to you. Because oftentimes we learn in life through the vulnerable experiences that we have, or through experiences that were hard for us, which makes that a vulnerable thing to express in a college essay. And again, you don't have to include the most vulnerable story in your life, but look at all of these challenges and say, which are the stories that I feel comfortable sharing that conveys vulnerability, but that also conveys who I am as a person. Again, you can look at the brainstorming session to get more in depth with this specific exercise, but I thought that that was important to share just to see what this looks like. All right. Now, another way to, I think, incorporate vulnerability into your essay is to really focus on that want-need dynamic, which can be somewhat found in the feelings and needs exercise, but can be further developed and made clear through this kind of an approach. So if you look at basically any film, or really probably any story in general, what you'll find is that there's an outside story, an external conflict, but what you also see is an inside story or an internal conflict. And the outside story is simply the external circumstances of the story, usually the main plot of the story. However, the inside story is the main character's inner journey, usually an emotional shift resulting from a realization. All right, so what does this look like in a story? If you've seen Spider-Man Homecoming, this will make sense. So of course the outside story, and again, sorry if this includes spoilers, but it's been out for a few years, so I apologize. But the outside story of Spider-Man Far From Home is that Peter wants to stop these creatures invading Earth, and later he needs to stop Mysterio from fooling Earth into, into being ruled by him, or whatever his plan was exactly. So that's the external conflict. That's the outside story. But the inside story, and what the entire movie is really about, is Peter needs to overcome his feelings of inadequacy. Iron Man died, and he feels as if the weight of Iron Man's legacy is continually being put on him. And so he has this, this great scene where he's in this plane, he's talking to Happy, which was, of course, Iron Man's, one of his good friends. And Peter says, I'll never be Iron Man. And he goes, yeah, of course you're not going to be Iron Man. Nobody's going to be Iron Man. But you're Peter Parker, and you need to live up to who that is. But in the story, you see this kind of external conflict, which is really just a tool for the screenwriters and the directors to tell the internal story of Peter overcoming his feelings of inadequacy. And you can use this same kind of concept in your own writing and in your essay. So we can see this with debate. And as a reminder, with debate was the essay about how a student which was shy, didn't feel confident, but then overcame that by joining debate. And so, one thing that I'll point out as well is that you see how I framed each of those: outside story, Peter wants; inside story, Peter needs, which is going to be very, very important, especially if you've written out your feelings and needs exercise, because you're going to see those kinds of connections already there. But what does this translate to with debate? The outside story, or what the author wants, is she wants to get over her shyness, and she does this by joining debate. So she succeeds in this. But what she needs to do is she needs to accept her shyness, and by extension, who she is as a person. And she kind of talks about this in the last paragraph of her essay, where she discusses this kind of dichotomy between North and South Korea, about how bringing together these two desperate parts of, this Korean heritage that she has. And this kind of is an analogy to how she is also overcoming her own kind of faults, which is she has this shyness that she's incorporating into who she is as a person to overcome it, but also accept who she is as a person. And I would say that this kind of acceptance of herself was critical in her developing the courage that she had as she kind of progressed through speech and debate. Now, before I get into the observation I was going to make, the question that you need to ask yourself is, was there a time where you were pursuing something, but you had a deeper need? And that's a pretty deep question. But what I will say is that this probably happens more than we would like to admit, right? So this would likely happen more than we would like to admit. And so look at the challenge or the challenges that you're including or already included in your essay, and ask yourself, what is the surface level story here? As in, what is the main challenge that I am facing with this story? All right, what is something that is important to me? And the way that I would kind of push this back to the feelings and needs exercise is, oftentimes you can connect these two together by looking at what you did and what you learned. Because if we look back at the last slide, this is very much kind of, you can see the idea of a want versus a need in this kind of exercise. Your challenge affects feelings. Those are kind of your wants, especially your feelings. What are your needs? You're given a chance being prompted. This could also be very much similar to what you want. Now, what did you learn, or what was important? That was what you needed. You needed to gain confidence, or you needed to realize that helping others was important, or something along those lines. And so you can use the feelings and needs exercise to kind of look at this kind of want versus need aspect of your own story. And again, like brainstorming, like outlining, this is going to take some conscious reflection to tease out all of these connections, because oftentimes we don't spend time thinking about our own challenges. We're thankful to be through with them. So again, the process of writing college essays is the process of conscious reflection. All right, moving on to so what moments. And again, so what moments are all about the insights that you bring to your essay. So you had this experience. Why did this experience matter? What was important about this experience? And as I've mentioned before in past sessions, you always want to show first and then tell. So show is simply, show illustrates that you're a talented writer and are the images that you are conveying, the images or examples that you are conveying to your reader. Tell, which is simply the insights that you have, illustrates that you are a critical thinker. These two important aspects of really anybody, but especially a college student or a soon-to-be college student. Ethan Sawyer puts it in a great way. He used this analogy of a painter, art critic, and the curator of an art installation. So let's think of an art installation as your essay. There are a few critical parts of an art installation. The first is obviously the painter. The painter is going to be thinking of the images and the artwork that's going to be in the art installation. What do they want to produce or give to the art exhibit to put in this art installation? Right? And think of these as the images and examples you are going to be using in the essay. But you also need something critical and interesting to say about those art pieces. So this is where the art critic comes in, where you say something smart about those images and examples in the art installation, but in your essay, what you're going to be saying about your examples and your images. However, the curator is also an important aspect of an art installation. They decide what artwork stays in the installation and what artwork does not stay in the installation, or what gets to go into the installation. So you as an essay writer are going to have to choose what images, examples, and insights are going to be included in your essay and what are going to have to be cut. Again, this is an important process throughout your entire writing and revising section. But through it all, what you do have to remember is that you should, under most circumstances, and I'll get to some exceptions later, but under most circumstances, what you want to do is you want to show first, give these images and examples, and then be the critic. Give your kind of so what insights after you've laid out these images. And this is what this looks like in a specific essay. So this is endodontics. Many nights you'll find me in the garage replacing standard chrome trim with an elegant piano black finish, or changing the threads on the stitching of the seats to add a personal touch. As I believe a few small changes can transform a generic product into a personalized work of art. What is the image here? The image is of changing these details, sometimes minor, with simply the stitching of the seats on a specific car. What's the insight? The insight is that I believe a few small changes can transform a generic product into a personalized work of art. That's a great paragraph, a great sentence. What do we do if we switch it up where we do the tell before the show? I believe a few small changes can transform a generic product into a personalized work of art, which is why many nights you'll find me in the garage replacing standard chrome trim with an elegant piano black finish, or changing the threads on the stitching of the seats to add a personal touch. For me, I think the first one, where it goes show and then tell, is a lot more interesting to read. That's because the first version, where you show and then tell, creates an interesting puzzle where the reader is asking themselves, I know that this image or example is going to connect some way into the overall theme of the essay, but how is it going to do that? How does it apply to the essay writer's story? And so what? Why is this image important? And then you go and then you answer that question by saying, as I believe a few small changes can transform a generic product into a personalized work of art. You answer that question. This is why this is important. Now, in this example, you obviously have it to where the show is directly followed by the tell. But you can also have it to where you kind of separate these things out, where you do the show, where you show this image, and maybe you develop what that image is, and then you include the tell later on in your essay. That's completely fine. That's a completely valid way of incorporating the same kind of dynamic into your writing. But again, the main thing here is that you want to make sure that you give these images and examples, and then discuss why they are important, what your insights are about these images or examples. All right, so what about craft? And craft is simply put just the style of writing that you have. And here are some ways in which you can do that. The first is that you need to express complex ideas in a succinct or brief way. So let's look at the essay Breaking Up with Mom. And this essay is all about her relationship with her mom. And this is towards the beginning of her essay. She writes, I'm your mother, Natyush, again, forgive me if I mispronounced that. She says in her heavy Russian accent, a tiny bird of a woman with clipped wings. These two sentences convey what their relationship looks like, or a significant part of what their relationship looks like, in a very succinct way without going into all the details of the relationship. Especially that last line, a tiny bird of a woman with clipped wings, especially as it's compared to that first sentence where it seems as if her mother is kind of giving her a command or asserting her authority over her daughter, but at the same time, her daughter is describing her in a way that illustrates that there's more to her than this kind of mother figure. And so it conveys this idea of a complex relationship between mother and daughter in two sentences. All right, so how do you do this? The first is that you need to have a complex idea. So here are some guiding questions that Ethan Sawyer gives that I think are instructive and can really help you think through some of the ideas you have and make them more complex and make them interesting. All right, so what are the positive/negative consequences of a specific belief or a specific idea that you have? Tease those negative and positive consequences out in your head and see, can you include them into your essay? And a good way to do this would be something along the lines of what we see in endodontics, which is this idea of a kind of a clear idea put in a very short format. What's the potential counter argument to the idea that you have, and can I debunk it? What are some holes that I can poke in these ideas with regards to what critics say about this idea? What's a call to action? Simply, what do I have to do now that I've come to this realization, or now that I have this idea? An example of this might be looking back at my personal story, which is where through my experience dealing with my stuttering problem and my experience in speech and debate, I got a passion for advocacy, advocating on behalf of things that I care about. So this kind of urgency and this necessity that I feel towards advocating for things that I think are important comes from the idea that ideas are important and that they have a direct impact on other people. And I got that specific idea from speech and debate through teasing out the kind of societal problems that we have and the root causes and their potential solutions. And so through speech and debate, I learned that ideas are important and have concrete consequences on the world around us. And from that, I gained the desire and the feeling of necessity of going out and advocating for ideas that I believe in. So we can see how a realization has led to an action. That's an interesting connection to have and to tease out in your own essay. All right. You can also ask yourself, what's an unexpected value? I mentioned this in some of my former sessions, but what is a value that is connected to either your career or to your story that people wouldn't expect to be connected to your specific career or your story? Or is there something else that I or we will gain if we learn from or put this belief into action? Ask yourself these questions, be mulling over them. And, again, this is one of those things where all of these changes can be done after you've written your first draft and after you've done your first sentence technique revision. Now, probably the one that probably can't or is a lot harder to do is vulnerability, because, again, a lot of that is done on the front end, but you can still add a lot of vulnerability after the fact by, again, I would probably talk to your advisors to see what you can specifically do in your essay, just because there's so many things that you could be doing that it's just not, it wouldn't be economical for me to go into all of those specific techniques in this session. But in returning to the idea of craft, here are some guiding questions for you as you think of the ideas that you have and you consciously digest those ideas. All right, now how do you put those into a succinct way? To put those into a succinct way, you're going to have to cut away a lot of just the unnecessary words that you have in your description. So as you're reading your idea, what I would do is I would have a conscious idea. I would write it out on a sheet of paper or type it out, whichever you prefer, and say what words are not necessary or are unnecessary for this idea. I would mark those out, rewrite it. All right, here's the complex idea in front of me. Do that again. What are some words or some things that are unnecessary? And it doesn't necessarily have to be words. It can be maybe ideas or parts of a sentence or of the idea that are, are interesting but aren't key to the actual idea itself. All right, cut those away. Don't include those. Then do the same thing again. Rewrite it. Then ask yourself, is there another way I can put this? Then rewrite it again. And so you'll see that this succinctness comes from doing it over and over again. If we look back at the example from breaking up with my mom, there's really no way that she came up with this complex idea and putting it in this succinct way on her first draft. Through subsequent drafts, she arrived at this interesting way to discuss her relationship with her mom. And that's what you're going to have to be doing during this revision process. There are going to be things that you're going to be changing through your essay. Again, it's part of the process. Don't let that discourage you. All right. So we've kind of gone through the main 4 areas of what makes a great college essay. We've seen how we can improve on these areas. And with these 4 areas in mind, here are some other things that I think are things that are going to definitely come up during your writing process, because they did for me. And so we're going to discuss how to incorporate those and what that should look like in your essay. So the first is, how do you show you are smart in your essay? And oftentimes this boils down to, and it boiled down to, for me, and that's how I thought about this for a long time, is simply using big or flowery language in your essay. And I would not do that. I would use big words very, very selectively, because it can take readers out of your essay, and it can almost seem like you simply had an essay. And especially if you don't incorporate these words very, very seamlessly into your essay, it's going to seem like you simply wrote an essay, pulled out a thesaurus, looked up long adjectives for the words that you have in your essay. You simply copied those, pasted them into your essay, and you're done. Now, there's definitely a place for a thesaurus and using flowery language, but you don't want to have that so prominent in your essay that it takes away from your essay. All right, now with that in mind, remember that the primary purpose of your essay is to illustrate your core values and your story of how you dealt with those challenges that you describe and the insights that you gained. And so a lot of your intelligence, a lot of your smarts are going to come out through choosing your challenge and conveying your insights and values. With that in mind, there are some techniques we can use to convey your smarts to a larger degree, even with these challenges, core values, and then insights. The first technique to use is simply ask questions. Ask great questions in your essay. Ask interesting questions in your essay. Now, for some of you, this might work within your essay. For others, it might not. Don't feel that you have to include all of these different techniques into your essay, because if you do, it's going to look cluttered. Again, think of yourself in the place of a curator. There are a lot of great artists. However, that does not mean that the curator of an art exhibit is going to include every artist. They might have a theme that they stick to, and so they're going to include paintings that follow that specific theme. In the same way, there are going to be a variety of images, examples, values, insights, techniques that you can use in your essay, but be that art curator. Cut things out that are not going to fit the main theme of your essay, and that you simply don't have time in your essay to fully develop. All right, so with asking great questions, it's going to help your readers see something ordinary in a new or interesting way. It can also inspire the reader's imagination about what you're discussing, and it can oftentimes demonstrate your core values. Excuse me. So let's look at this in the Type B endodontics essay. In this paragraph, the author writes, "As a kid, I was always curious. I was unafraid to ask questions and didn't worry how dumb they would make me sound. In second grade, I enrolled in a summer science program that built a solar-powered oven that baked real cookies. I remember obsessing over the smallest details. Should I paint the oven black to absorb more heat? What about its shape? The spherical shape would allow for more volume, but would it trap heat as well as conventional rectangular ovens? Even then, I was obsessed with the details of design." And so here, we can see these different elements of a great question. We're seeing things in a new way. I had never thought of a solar powered oven. And I had never really thought about an oven being a sphere, right? Like maybe a pizza oven. I've seen that before. It's kind of like a spherical shape. But other than that, I've never thought of an oven in a rectangular or in a spherical shape before. So that made me think of what this oven might look like. These questions provoked in me a mental image, an interesting image. And so we get how this shows or kind of prods your reader into seeing things in a new way and to inspire the reader's imagination. But what it also does is it demonstrates this author's core value of being detail-oriented and curious. And he begins his essay by saying, "As a kid, I was always curious." And these questions directly tie to his story, and they illustrate his core values of curiosity and attention to detail. So again, you've got to make sure that you've weaved these questions in seamlessly, which you can only do by revising. All right, so we can also see this with debate, or with the essay with debate. In particular, I am interested in the North-South Korea tension. What irreconcilable differences have prompted a civilization to separate? Policy implications remain vague and sovereignty theories have their limits. How do we determine what compromises are to be made? And on a personal level, why did my grandfather have to flee from his destroyed North Korean hometown, and why does it matter? Here, she's talked about how she was shy. She's overcome that shyness, but through the debate, she's also gained a passion for policy discussion and analysis. And here she is discussing specifically a specific policy that touches on something she cares about and some questions that she has about this issue. What irreconcilable differences have prompted a civilization to separate? How do we determine what compromises are to be made? Why did my grandfather have to flee from his destroyed North Korean hometown, and why does it matter? An important point here is that, and Ethan Sawyer points this out in his book, which is that the author of this essay had to do research in order to arrive at these questions. As a high schooler, it's there are only so many things that you know and are introduced to. And while this author likely knew that her grandfather fled from North Korea and maybe had asked herself, why does this matter? Some other things she had to do research into to devise this question, which is what irreconcilable differences have prompted a civilization to separate. She talked about policy implications remain vague and sovereignty theories had their limits. She had to do research into these policy implications, policy proposals, and these sovereignty theories in order to get to where she is. So if you have an overall theme, or you have a specific area that you are talking about, think about including some of these questions that directly tie to this specific issue, maybe even questions that you have. And again, the best way to see whether these questions fit is to read it aloud and ask other people to read it and tell you if it makes sense to them. Your advisors are going to be critical in that area. All right. The second technique we can use is to use technical language. Now, oftentimes, we have passions or things that we know a lot about, and we can include this technical language to show that you know a lot about a specific thing. What's important though is that you don't go overboard with technical language, and because it can definitely, you'll lose your reader, and you might even seem overconfident because you're just like spitting out all these phrases without giving any contextualization to them. So in order to solve that, use technical language, but use it sparingly, but also contextualize the language that you use right after you use it. So for example, this is from endodontics. He's talking about this math equation, and he goes on to say, and details are more than details. It can mean the difference between negative and positive infinity. And for somebody who doesn't know math all that well, you might be asking yourself, what does negative and positive infinity have to do with this? Or what's the implications of that? Why does that matter? He goes on and he says, an impossible range of solutions. So he gives this kind of more technical language, negative and positive infinity, then he contextualizes it, an impossible range of solutions. But you can also use context clues to kind of put this into consideration as well. So for example, in the same essay, endodontics, if you'll remember, he's talking about repairing cell phones, and he mentions the IPS LCD or something like that. I have no idea what that is, but I'm assuming it's an integral part of the cell phone. And so I don't need to know exactly what that is in order for me to understand his main idea there. And so there is a place to use this kind of technical language without giving explicit contextualization. But you have to ask yourself, would someone who isn't as knowledgeable about this issue, would this make sense to them? In the sense of, is it necessary for my point to know what this specific thing is? If it isn't necessary to your point to know what exactly this technical language means, then you can leave it more vague. But if it is pretty important, such as in the case on this slide, make it more explicit. And again, that's going to come out through asking other people to read your essay, because they're going to be like, what does this mean? And if somebody asks you, what does this mean? That means that it might be clear to you, but it's not clear to your reader. All right. The next thing we can look at is when to or how to brag appropriately. Your college essay is to showcase who you are as a person and your achievements. So, a great place to do that is your college essay. And I know for me, when I was writing my college essays, and even when I still write, personal statements or things along those lines, for me, it's hard to kind of convey my achievements, because it feels as if I am doing it in a way that is, I'm doing it too proudly. I'm not being humble about it. And I fear that that can come across to the reader and it would paint me in a bad way. And if that idea does come across to your reader, it can paint you in a bad way. If you seem arrogant, if you seem pompous, that is not something you want to convey to your reader. But we can convey your achievements without conveying or making it seem as if you are a pompous or proud or overly proud person. So let's look at with debate. More importantly, I now confront issues instead of avoiding them. It is exciting to discover solutions to problems that affect others, as I was able to do as a part of the first place team for the 2010 UN Global Debates Program on climate change and poverty. Take a natural interest in global issues and plan to become a foreign affairs analyst or diplomat by studying international affairs with a focus on national identity. Here, what is the achievement? She got first place at the 2010 UN Global Debates Program, which is, that's great. That's very, very cool. So that is her achievement. And she nests it in a way that does not make her seem arrogant or pompous. We can see this kind of same idea in endodontics. I love sharing this appreciation with others and have taken it upon myself to personally eradicate mathonomophobic confundosis, my calculus teacher's term for extreme fear of math. A small group of other students and I have devoted our after-school time to tutoring our peers in everything from pre-algebra to AP Calculus BC. And I believe my fluency in Hebrew and Farsi has helped me to connect with some of my school's Israeli and Iranian students. There's nothing better than seeing a student resolve a difficult problem without me saying anything. So again, it could be it could seem pompous if you're just simply discussing, like, look at all of these languages that I know. But this author nests this concept of speaking multiple languages in his essay in a way that is not pompous in any way, and actually shows how he's actually caring for other people through his skills of knowing these languages. And so here are some things to consider. The first is that these paragraphs, both of these paragraphs, are primarily about something else. They aren't about the specific achievements that these people accomplished. Right? So for example, the first paragraph is all about developing courage. And then she includes, an outcome of her courage, which is her first place finish. In endodontics, that paragraph is all about helping others overcome their fear of math. And the author was able to do this through his skills of speaking these multiple languages. Again, paragraphs are primarily about something else, and then they include the achievement along with that. Now, there is a time and a place to include, an extended discussion on something like this, because I know, for example, there are some people who I read essays this past year and even, many years prior, where they discuss, for example, I think in Russia they have some specific science Olympiads or something along those lines, and so they were discussing their experience studying for those Olympiads. And that was an integral part of their development as a student and as a person. And so the achievement of doing well at the Olympiad was an integral part of who they are as a person. And so there is a time and a place to make, these achievements or these kinds of programs integral to your essay, which is when they do play a significant part. But remember that a good way to mitigate the idea that you're pompous or arrogant is to nest them with a value so that you can introduce a value and then illustrate it through your achievement. And this is the second point that I want to make, is that I said that usually you want to show and then tell. When you're conveying an achievement, it is often better to tell and then show, which is that make your values clear before you make your brag, before you convey your achievement. Make clear why this is important, because it can, if you start with your achievement, it can seem as if you're just being like, oh, like tooting your own horn, like, oh, look at this great thing that I did. But if you start with a value, you prime the reader to say, this is this is the person who is writing this essay. Here's an example of when this value led to a concrete benefit or a concrete achievement in their life. So unlike the prior example where normally you would show before you tell, when you're doing a brag, it might be better to tell before you show. All right, with those, that's all I have. And so I do want to say thank you for listening. And so we'll take some questions at this point about some of the specific things that I said, or any other questions that you have, because I know some of the ideas that I discussed can be kind of complex. And so if you have any clarifying questions, please let me know. At this point, again, you should have written your first draft, but now be revising, do that first sentence technique, and then send it to your advisors, ask your friends to read it, and then ask yourself those critical questions of a great college essay to see where your essay is coming up short and how you can improve it. Somebody asked, can you check our essays? Yes. So Education USA advisors can absolutely check. Absolutely, yes. And one thing that I will point out as we're waiting for some more questions to come in is, if you look at the session, what you'll see is you'll see different aspects from different sessions all coming together in this one session. And what's important is that the ideas in essay writing are so interconnected. And that's why I stressed so heavily the importance of brainstorming, the importance of outlining, because all of these are going to, the consequences of you doing these things will um, will manifest in your final product. So it's important to make sure that you are doing these things on the front end so that they pay off in the back end, which is, it's going to pay off in your revisions. If you skip brainstorming, if you skip outlining, your revisions are going to be a lot more intense than they normally would be if you had done those things to begin with. So if you want to avoid a significant increase in your headache, then I would definitely recommend that you brainstorm, outline, write, revise multiple times. I think Rashawn is asking, for those who are still here, who has read those Common App essay prompts? I think maybe an important question from that is how do you feel about answering those essay prompts in light of these sessions? Do you have any questions about how to answer those essay prompts? Because I know, for example, sometimes those common essay prompts can be a little bit hard to kind of tease out what exactly they want you to address. And so, since I said chose the second top, what is the second topic? It's been a while since I've looked at those essay prompts. Could you lay out what that second topic is about? So, is it just about what's the significant challenge that you face? Is that what it is about? It's been quite a few years since I've read the Common App essay prompts, but I'm assuming it's something along those lines. Like, what's a big challenge that you faced? And for that, obviously I would definitely recommend a type A or C essay structure. And so definitely go back to my former sessions if you need a reminder or a refresher on that format. And since we're still waiting on questions, I'll make another point, which is a lot of these same techniques can be used in your other essays. So when you're asked, why do you want to come to this school? You can use a lot of these same techniques, right? If you want to discuss why you want to come to a specific school, talk about show and then tell. Talk about a specific thing at the school that is attracting you. And by specific, I mean like specific. So a specific professor, a specific program, a specific club, a specific activity, something specific at the school that is attracting you, and tell why that would be important to you, what that would mean for you, and how you would impact that specific activity or whatever, right? So there are ways you can use these same techniques in other kinds of essays that aren't simply about a challenge. Okay, great. Thank you, Marzin. Yeah, that's pretty clearly a type A or type C essay. So that should be very, very simple for many of you to kind of look back at and kind of organize and write. Of course, thank you. And one thing that I will stress just one last time, which is it is very important to have other people read your essays. I know for me, I did not do that in high school. I'm sure there were people who could have read them for me, but I was somebody who was very much didn't want to kind of be that vulnerable, which is it is pretty vulnerable to let other people read your writing. But I think it's crucial to have other people read your college essays in order to give solid feedback on what you have. And yes, of course, thank you all for coming. I very much appreciate it. Oh, and as this is likely my last session, so it might be the last time that I ever have the ability to speak with you. I hope that you all, best of luck on your college aspirations. It's definitely something that's challenging, but something that is definitely achievable. We've seen it done before. You all have great resources in Education USA Kazakhstan, or wherever you're from, for that matter. So definitely take advantage of those resources because they can help you out a lot.